Digital guitar. Something that I resisted for quite a long time, and even when I did try to jump into it, I just couldn't get along with it. Weren't all that great. Initially, it was because most of the early modelers sounded like poo-poo butt nuggets. But as time went on, technology advanced, and I went bald, guitar modelers became more and more of a viable option for those of us who want legitimate amp-like guitar tones. But even then, I still couldn't get into it. And it's not because I was resisting or because I didn't want it to be good. The thing that I was running into with digital guitar modelers is most of them had their own interfaces, their own learning curves, their own special set of tips and tricks in order to get them to function and sound optimal. And for somebody like me whose attention span is the equivalent of throwing a bouncy ball in a tiny room and basically watching it bounce off of every surface repeatedly, I could just never settle down and actually focus long enough in order to figure out all the little quirks of those devices. Enter the neural Quad Cortex. Right there. Initially, I had no interest in this unit until I talked to a couple of friends who said, "Dude, I am the same way. I have never really gotten into the modeling stuff because the interfaces are difficult. This thing absolutely changes the game. Get your hands on it and check it out." So finally, I caved. Decided to pick one up and mess around with it, and immediately I knew that this was the one that was going to change my mind. Now, it's not because the built-in modeling is amazing. It's not because it has more options and more features than anything else. It was simply because that user interface is just so easy and so intuitive for somebody like me. You don't have to jump through a million menus. You don't have to have a separate desktop editor, although they finally have one, just to try and make sense of the tones that you're putting together. It's as simple as tapping or dragging and dropping things into place, and that's it. Now, a lot of things have changed since the last time that I checked out the Quad Cortex here on my channel with you guys, and I figured it was time for a revisit. So not only are we going to revisit the Quad Cortex, the capture functionality, the amp simulation functionality, and some of the impulse responses that are built into this thing, but my friends over at Sweetwater gave me a neural Quad Cortex to give to you. So be sure to stay till the end of the video to find out how you can enter this giveaway and win a Quad Cortex full of belligerent amateur amp captures. Let's do it! All right, guys, hope you're doing great out there today. If this is your first time here at my channel, my name is Kyle. What I do is I take all sorts of awesome high gain related guitar equipment, I record it with a simple setup, and I give you the unprocessed audio on your end. And today is an exciting day for a couple of reasons. Number one, we're giving away a Quad Cortex because my friends over at Sweetwater have sponsored this video. They have sent me a brand new one to give away to one of my lucky viewers, and that is honestly incredible. I love that. Thank you to Sweetwater for sponsoring this video, but it also gave me an excuse to kind of go back and revisit the Quad Cortex here on the channel because I haven't really touched on it in 2 years since my original video. Now, a lot has changed in that time. The Quad Cortex has gone through many updates. A lot of the original issues with the unit have been fixed through software and firmware updates. Most notably, they have added a desktop editor to the software for the neural Quad Cortex, so you no longer have to edit on the device.
I am really excited about this. I mean, it's really easy to use. Like, look at this. You want to add something, everything's right here.
If you don't want to, you can hook it up to your computer and you can do all of your editing, all of your preset saving and capturing and creating and blah, 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 buzzwords on that desktop editor. Today, what I really want to see is how has the capture process improved? Does it sound any different? Is it any closer? So we're going to capture and compare all three of these amplifiers that are sitting behind me, and then I'm gonna give these captures away to you guys for free. Follow me at Thrash Damon on the Neural Quad Cortex Cloud. We're gonna build up a tone around nothing but the built-in modeling on the Quad Cortex, and then again, we're gonna check out how close can it get with these three awesome amplifiers with the capturing process. So without further ado, let's jump into it. Alright guys, so I have a pretty cool setup going on for this video. Right now we have all three of these monster tube amplifiers hooked up into my KHE amplification amp switcher, so I can just switch back and forth effortlessly. And then all of these amps are going into the 2-notes captor, which is what we're actually going to be using in order to capture these amplifiers with the Quad Cortex. If you guys are not doing a capture where you're miking a speaker cabinet, you're going to need some sort of load box or at least a direct box in between the amp and the cab in order to capture that signal and send it back to the Quad Cortex. And most importantly, to have a load on your amp so you don't blow things up. So we have the DI out of the captor going into the Quad Cortex, and I'm actually going to show you, if you've never captured with this before, the walkthrough that Neural gives you in order to do that, because it's kind of a difficult, or not difficult, a confusing setup. We're over here on the Quad Cortex. Step 1, plug your guitar input into input 1. We have done that. You hit the next arrow, and then over here, it gives you a bunch of different monitoring options. Whether you have a 1/4 inch out or, you know, whatever you're using has a 1/4 inch in, or you can just do straight up headphones if you like. So now that we've got that figured out, on to the next part. We hook a capture out cable, and typically this is the cable that would send the signal into your amplifier itself, but because we are using this amp switcher, we're sending it into the amp switcher. And then finally from the amplifier, or in this case from the amp switcher, we're gonna take that output and that goes back into the input number 2 on the Quad Cortex. And again, this is our DI from our captor that is being sent in here. So we are capturing just the amp, we're capturing the preamp and the power section and nothing else. So with all that being said, let's hop into the actual start capture process. This is where you set all of your levels. So if I switch on to amp number 1, which is our Bogner Uber Ultra, as you can see, we're getting signal. So you essentially need to set those levels so that they either barely go over this line over here or they just stay right underneath it. So that way, if you do that, especially with the input level, all of your captures will be roughly the same volume, which is an issue that I've heard other people running into. Downloaded captures from other people that the volumes are all over the place. So I always try to keep mine right at that line. And then it also gives you an in-1 level, which is your guitar signal input. So if you have really hot output pickups, you can turn that input down, and if you have really low input pickups, you can turn it up so you can get to that unity or that bass line, whatever you want to call it. And then our in type, since we are using a DI box, it is technically a microphone and not an instrument. And then on this second page, this is where you can do ground lifts and stuff if you're experiencing ground hums. Or like with the captor, we need phantom power in order to power the unit. We can actually provide phantom power via the Quad Cortex. So that's pretty cool. Last but not least, this is the new part, the speaker or the impulse, the cab simulation here. Before, this would just be a straight signal from the amplifier that you were capturing. And as we all know, that sounds awful. So now we have the option to put whatever cab sim or impulse response in here that we like. In this case, I am using the built-in Zilla Cabs Creamback 16. So let's start with amp number 1. This is our Bogner Uber Ultra. We're gonna hit start capture, and it's gonna start making all sorts of crazy alien noises. This is where you go take a dump, go pet your dogs, get caught up on the latest Sun News articles, whatever it is that you like to do to kill time. And I'll meet you back here when it's done. It's done. All right, guys, so we are back and the Quad Cortex has finished up the capture of the Bogner Uber Ultra. Here is the amp itself. Here is the capture. All right, honestly, that's super close. One thing I've always noticed with the Quad Cortex is there's a little bit more of like a high end or a high mid grind than the actual amp itself, but... Hey guys, real quick interruption here. It's actually been a little while since I've done a Quad Cortex capture, and I completely forgot that the captor, the 2-notes captor that I'm using in this video, actually colors the DI. It's shown to add lows and add highs, which I think is exactly what I was noticing in all of the captures in this video, which is the reason that I switched over to a Kemper DI around a year ago, but because I needed a load box in order to show this to you guys for the video, I ended up going with the captor and completely forgot that it adds a little bit of its own EQ to the signal. So that is really what you guys are gonna be hearing for the primary differences. So that was an oversight on my end. I apologize. Just keep that in mind as the video rolls on. So back to the rest of the video. Oh man, not only is the sound almost all the way there, but the feel is great too. It definitely does not feel like you're playing a digital recreation. Like there is still some give, there's still some pushback on the right hand. So it seems to do a pretty good job at just capturing the overall essence of the amp with minimal changes. Yeah, close. When I flip back and forth between the two, there are some noticeable differences, but overall, it's pretty damn good, and I think that you're gonna find yourself not noticing those differences in a mix more than likely. So with that being said, let's save this and let's move over to the Ceriatone Molecular. Boom, Belligerent Uber Ultra. I will upload that as soon as this video is done. Over here, we pick our emblem, we pick our instrument. Those are also new additions since the last time that I've done this actually, and then we save. And that's it. Let's go ahead and capture this bad boy. Since we're still set up, I had to change nothing. I can just start another capture. One thing I did not mention before, we are going amplifier straight into these amps. There are no boosts, there are no post-processing effects either. It's just guitar, amp, impulse response into the DAW, which is what you guys are hearing. So, let's hit that start capture. All right guys, amp number 2 is done. Let's start with our reference and let's see how it compares. So that was the amp. Here is the Quad Cortex. All right, so again, there are noticeable differences. It is not exactly the same, but in this instance, I kind of like the capture a little bit better than what we're getting out of the actual amp right now, because it seems just a tad thicker. It seems like the upper mids that were a little bit quacky on the amp are relaxed a little bit, and overall, it just sounds a little bit more even. Again, let's go back and forth. Here's the Cortex. And the amp. I will say on this particular amp, that's probably the most noticeable I've ever seen it as far as the amp itself versus the capture when comparing them directly back to back. Overall, the amp is brighter, it's noticeably thinner, it's noticeably less saturated than the capture. So that's one thing to keep in mind, is not every amp is going to capture the same. Some might capture more accurately than others, and it's just gonna depend on, do you like the sound that it's giving you after the capture? And in this case, I actually like it better. So with that being said, let's move on to the Badlander for our final capture. But before we do that, we have to actually save our capture here because I forgot, because again, super short attention span. All right, last but not least, here's our Badlander with the Legendary Tones Hot Mod installed. All right, so that was the amp. Here is the capture. right, so again, very similar to the Ceriatone, but maybe not quite as noticeable with the Badlander. It seems like the capture that we got from the amp is overall a little bit more relaxed in the mids and a little bit fuller on the low end. But the gain structure, the gain character is there, the overall voicing is there. Very, very close. Nothing on the market yet has been able to get it and capture it identically, but I think the Quad Cortex does a great job. It keeps it very, very close. I personally am satisfied with the captures. Let's check out a couple of the built-in models. Let's build a tone. So as you can see, we've got a bar across the top. We are gonna start off with what is maybe the most important component of any high gain tone, a gate. We need a gate because things are gonna get noisy. So let's throw in that gate there. Let's go into our actual overdrives because we want to throw an overdrive in because we are belligerent amateurs, for God's sakes. Go with something that we definitely know that everybody will know. That is a green 808. Let's go in there. Let's turn our drive down. Let's turn our level up just like real life. All right, so let's go into our amps. I actually want to revisit the SLO because I remember not being super impressed with the SLO the first go around. So SLO, Crunch Bright, SLO 100 lead, that's what we want. And then let's get our cab in here. For the cab, I've found myself really liking the Cali Traditional 92. One thing that I forgot to do when I was first getting into this was going into the actual cab sims themselves. If you're just going through and selecting them and just kind of previewing them as you're bumping down, you're really missing out on the full picture, and I can say this from experience because all of the cab simulations that Neural has built in have multiple microphones, and usually one of those mics is offset. It's like a ribbon or a condenser, something that brightens up the tone or maybe adds, you know, some EQ to the overall impulse response that is not gonna sound good or is not gonna sound familiar to your ears. So in here, we've got a dynamic 57 on one of the speakers and we've got a ribbon 160 on the other. Distance and position are all set in areas where I'm fairly happy with them, but if we want to move it, it's like I'm touching a nipple. We can kind of drag it a little closer to the center, hit the check mark to save it. And with all that being said, we have a tone. Top of my head's chopped off. All right, so that is not dialing the amplifier in at all, and it already sounds pretty good. But let's see if we can get it a little bit closer. Let's go into the amp itself. All right, so that's sounding pretty close. The SLO to me has always been a little stuffy sounding. It's pretty round in the upper mids. And let's actually roll the mids back just a tad. All right, so overall, that sounds good to me. It's got kind of that big, thick, low end thing going on that you're gonna find with an SLO. Is very common. Let's move over this stuff though, which as you can see is easy as dragging and dropping. We're actually going to add in an EQ, much like I would for really tubby amps in real life. So we've got a graphic 9-band EQ here. Let's jump in and let's actually cut out some of those lower frequencies. Let's roll back that 65 Hertz by about 2 decibels. Let's roll back that 120 by about 1. And just like that, we have tightened up the low end and made it much more percussive than just going straight into the amp by using the overdrive and by using the EQ. I think that's pretty rad, and overall, honestly, this sounds really good, but still not like super convincing to me. I can definitely tell it's going for the SLO thing, and I definitely think that it sounds good, but it just seems like there's a little something in the mids that's maybe not quite there. But you guys can see how easy it is to jump in here. If we want to change this, we just hit these 3 dots, change device, and then we can select what other amplifier that we want. Ooh, Victor Squid. This is actually new. I think that this is the Kraken. Dude, I'm happy with that. That sounds good. That's definitely gonna cut in the mix. Let's check out one more amplifier. All right, you guys know we have to do it. PV 505 lead. Now before, I thought it did a really good job on the 5150 models, both the EVH and the PV. And here it seems to kind of be doing the same thing. Let's pull the gain back quite a bit. Let's pull that presence up. Let's get a little bit of depth or resonance. That sounds awesome. That sounds really, really good, actually. Alright guys, that is going to do it for me. My cameras are slowly but surely dying off. So yeah, my thoughts on the Quad Cortex, pretty much the same as they were before. They serve the purposes that I needed to serve. The user interface is super simple. The tones are close enough. They're not dead on, but they are close enough that honestly, most people are not gonna notice in a difference unless they are in a mix, unless they are specifically listening for each individual little difference. And I gotta say guys, as someone who loves to chase tone, who's someone who loves to compare things and shoot things out, I liked the captures. I thought the captures sounded great. I have and will continue to use captures of my amplifiers to simplify the recording process, to put this on a pedal board as part of a live, like portable fly rig or a backup rig. There is so much more that you can do with the Quad Cortex that I didn't even scratch the surface of here. You can literally power your entire band with this thing, but I am just a simple belligerent amateur and those are not the needs that I need to have filled. That sounded really weird. But with that being said, on to the part of the video that I'm sure you have been anxiously waiting for, the giveaway. So all that you guys have to do to get in on this giveaway from our friends over at Sweetwater is to go to the link down below in the description and in the comments and click on that, and it will walk you through all the steps in order to just sign up and enter the giveaway. And there are basically ways to earn like bonus tickets or bonus entries by following me on Instagram and other things. Again, the website will walk you through all of that stuff. I believe that I'm gonna set this up to go for 3 days, so you will get 3 days in order to get your entry in, and then the winner will be announced at the end of those 3 days. So huge thank you again to my friends over at Sweetwater for providing the Quad Cortex to give away. If you guys would like to pick up a Quad Cortex or any new guitar gear at all, you know where to go. Head down to the affiliate link in my description of my video. Anytime you guys click that link, it massively helps me out. It costs you nothing extra. That's gonna do it for me, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to hit the like button if you like the video. Subscribe if you're not already subscribed. Kyle here again. We'll see you next time.
You know what this wall is missing? Another amp. There we go.